A lot of us guys, we hang our identity on what it is that which we do. I was in a position where I had to find my purpose. It wasn't possible for me to learn everything I needed to know by myself. You've then got to adapt. You've got to start taking on all of the things that are happening in this new ecosystem, this new culture, and only then can you begin to excel. The more you learn, the more you earn. Dream big, start small, systemize the shit out of everything, research financial principles and management, and understand business development.
This is Professional Builder Secrets, the #1 podcast to help you grow your building company safely and securely. Brought to you by the Association of Professional Builders. Join us every week as we talk to industry experts and your fellow professional builders on everything you need to know to generate more leads, more sales, and higher margins while improving the building experience for your clients.
We have another exciting episode from the Professional Builder Secrets podcast. Joining us today is Max Peterson, CEO and Managing Partner for Smith & Sons in Canada. Max, how are you doing?
G'day, Bosco, from one Canadian to another, kind of.
I know. They got all the Canadians running these podcasts. Tell us a little bit about your origin story, my man, and how did you get started in the building industry?
Yeah, look, I guess I got started in the building industry because my old man said, "You're not smart enough to do grade 12, and I'm sick of paying private education fees, so you can go and learn a trade." So I actually did that and sort of, spent about 15 years as a carpenter, did an apprenticeship in Brisbane there, and then got a builder's license. And so that was all pretty cool. Married a Canadian in 95, had 6 kids. And then in 2010, her old man was my drywaller, my gyprocker. And he decided that because my wife was born in the town I'm living in here in British Columbia. And he come to me one day and decided he's going to ruin my life. And he said, "I'm going to move back to Canada to retire." And so, the mother-daughter thing was pretty tight. So after 3 years of arguing and making her cry, I gave up, and here we are. So that's how I got into the industry, and that's how I ended up in Canada.
Well, that's kind of ironic because I was locked in Australia for a few years. I just got back to Canada a while back too. Came down in the fall and it was beautiful weather. And the day I left, it just started to rain in Vancouver. So it sounds like that's the norm for Vancouver weather.
Yeah.
So what's the type of building company you currently have with the relocation? Like how have you reinvented yourself, I guess, here?
Yeah, well, I guess I had moved fairly quickly. We talked about moving to Canada, and I woke up one morning in July, and it was a Saturday morning, and I got to a point where I thought my youngest is about to finish elementary school or primary school. And I kind of felt I was in a moment there where I kind of had to get things turning if I was going to get her into high school, either in Australia or Canada. And we made that, by the time we closed down businesses and we jettisoned a bunch of assets, I think it was about 7 months. And I was sitting here in Canada. And of course, I didn't really put together the permanent residency application or even a work visa. So I was semi-retired for about 22, 24, 26 months. And so for me, I had all that time, I guess, to start to think about after spending 25 years in the building industry in Southeast Queensland. I had to figure out, well, what am I going to do? And so I had a lot of time. It was funny because I think I'd spent that much time working and being so busy. And then I got off the boat, metaphorically speaking, in Vancouver, and everything just come to a grinding stop. And I had nothing to do, nobody to talk to effectively, no business, no nothing. And so what it did was it was a lot of soul searching. I often say that it was probably one of the darkest times of my life because a lot of us guys, we hang our identity on what it is that which we do. And so it was a moment in time where I actually had, everyone was happy. The wife was happy. The kids see snow for the first time. Everything's humming along. But I was in a position where I had to find my purpose, because effectively it had been taken away from me. And I think there might have been a lot of reservation, which is why I, argued with her for 3 years and made her cry and stuff. But then to get here and really sort of dig down, of course, I started to look around. I go, what are my options? And one of those options was the contact that I had, in Smith & Sons back home. And so, we made that contact and sort of the rest is history. So, but there was a lot of waiting still to be done because, I couldn't work until I'd got my permanent residency sorted out, which literally took that, 2 years. And dealing with Canadian immigration, bless their bloody hearts, unbelievably painful. If I run my business the way that immigration runs their business, I would be out of business. Just saying.
Well, is the old saying, right? An idle mind is a devil's workshop. So I guess you really had to get in touch with who you were at that point. I relate. When I first moved to Australia, it took me a while before I got back into the workforce. And like you, I had to really find myself in many ways. Tell me a little bit about, when you look back at your illustrious career, what do you think was one of those challenges that you've encountered when you first got in the building spaces, and how did you overcome it, when you look back at everything you've done?
Well, I think, like I said, having spent 15 years as a carpenter, a lot of the motivation for me to go and get a builder's license was I was just tired. I was tired of the limitation, and I was tired of having those limitations, but I was tired of dealing with people like supervisors. I just had a gut full, very entrepreneurial by nature, and I felt I needed to have a crack. So really in the early days running a carpentry type operation, it was fairly straightforward. What I realized, matter of fact, what I did is, and this will resonate with some of your Eastern Seaboard builders in your audience, is that I actually approached GJ Gardner out of the blue because I had got my builder's license in, I think, mid-year or May 2009. And what I did is I thought, you know what, I'm really good. And this is why I look back and I think what I'm doing today, I'm very much in line with what my purpose is. Because even back then I thought to myself, I'm really good at knocking nails into wood, but really, and I don't mind talking to people, but beyond that, I really don't know a lot about running a large building company. And large for me at that point would have been $1 million a year. And so what I did is I went and reached out, and really above my pay grade for me to go and talk to a mob called GJ Gardner Homes, it was just out of control. It was just never going to happen. So me highlighting within my understanding that I was very good at framing or finishing or all that sort of carpentry oriented stuff, running a business and being a builder or general contractor it was so off the radar, and I needed to have that input. So I ended up being, a franchised operator with Smith & Sons. And soon after that, once I finished my tenure, after leaving that group, I, got in touch with Russ from APB and sort of, so now I guess I've known Russ for easy 10 years at some level. So yeah, but definitely some of the issues was just that. It was just knowing, I think there's a level of self-awareness, like a variable of success for us builders and general contractors is our level of self-awareness. It is also our work ethic. It's also our creativity. But at that point, I think what set me up, what was a good foundation stone, was I understood how much I didn't know. And so I think it was at that point that God knows how I found Russ. I couldn't tell you. Maybe he can. But at that point, it was super important for me to start to look at how I was going to, get CRMs, how I was going to do estimating. I just left the franchise, part of my life, and I'm like, okay, so there was all of these things that were set up for me there. Now I'm out by myself because I've chosen to go that way. How am I going to do that? And so however I come across Russ, everything that he said just made sense to me, and it really has stuck with me for the longest time. It was, it was a great moment in time for me. So, just lack of, understanding of how to run a building company. That would be my biggest vulnerability at that point. And I think builders have that to this day.
And this was when Russ was part of the co-construct offering, I guess, in Australia as well, when you met him?
Yeah, because we utilized that. We talked to Russ about, my own little website there about getting a source code, where we could have a little video play and talk about co-construct and things like that. Interestingly enough, you can't go and get a co-construct subscription anymore. It's got to be Builder Trend. But nonetheless, that was where, for me, I think, a challenge was to develop at pace and know that it wasn't possible for me to learn everything I needed to know by myself. And so there was this and I already had a fairly good understanding of team, mentoring and coaching, having had a little bit of a background in network marketing. Some of your audience may have no clue what that is, but a big company in the US starting with a big A, I'd been involved there. So I was already reading books and educating myself around self-development. So I thought, well, that's a business principle. It's a business fundamental that affects the human in a positive way, doesn't matter what industry you're doing, right? So, it's super exciting to jam with Russ in those early days and, having had a co-construct sort of foray, it was good.
So you're in your groove and then you have to, sort of move out of love and family and everything else. What's that like to like go, hey, I've got to shut down and now go hang out with the Canucks in a different country? What was going through your mindset? And was it easy for your family? Is it, well, were they excited? Were you sort of torn? What was your mindset going through it all?
Well, I think the emotional gymnastics that happens is because you're very much committed to the happiness and well-being of your wife and family. I mean, that's first and foremost. But the contradictory nature of the human race is that, but I'm playing Australian rules football with the club that I've been playing with since I was 8 years old. I'm racing go-karts, at Ipswich Raceway. I'm doing all of these things, and it's like I'm 42 years of age and I'm looking for my midlife crisis. And now I've got to go and move countries and, restart in a new culture. And honestly, I kept saying to the missus, I'm like, we don't need to do this. We're set up quite well. Like life is good. And of course, being in the building industry since I was 16 at 42 years of age, and I had, a wealth of contacts. Like I had a really good established kind of routine and operation. And so, it scared the shit out of me. There's no question. At 42, that's not what you don't, and I've got a wife and 6 kids, which I'm dragging. And so it's like, geez, I've got to go and do all this all over again. So, what was going through my mind is, the fear of the unknown for sure. And even though the Canadian culture, as you know, and the Aussie culture, there's definitely significant differences, but it's a pretty good overlap. If you're going to do it, do A to Canada or vice versa. It's pretty close.
That's true. That's true. I mean, the only thing about adjusting to the culture is the accents. For me, I find that the Aussie accents shorten everything. It took me a while to figure out what Macca's was. And for you, you're the foreigner in Canada that has an accent too when you get there. How did you transition to the culture?
Well, here's what I do. Yeah, because there's this thing for me to succeed. I had to do this. I knew that I was going to immerse myself in the new culture. And this is the same in business. When folks get into APB, this is essentially what you got to do. You got to immerse yourself in the program. You've then got to adapt. You've got to start taking on all of the things that are happening in this new ecosystem, this new culture. And only then can you begin to excel. And so for me, coming into a new culture, I had to start talking a little bit slower and rounding words off and not say I'm going down the Bottle-O and I'm going to stop at the servo to put some petrol in, because everyone's like, what are you talking about?
So tell me a little bit about the opportunity with Smith & Sons. How did that come about? It sounds like you had all these connections as well and you leveraged your relationships as well to get there.
Yeah, sure. I think in 2012, I actually, because Smith & Sons and GJ Gardner Homes, sort of brother brands, sister brands or whatever. And so I think we flew out to LA and we met Greg Gardner. He was stationed in Los Angeles at that time. And we flew up to Vancouver and we kicked some tires back in 2012 whilst I was still with the Smith & Sons group in Australia. And then, of course, after things transpired, and of course, I went about business on my own, and then I decided to make a move here. I just made a call back. I had a really strong relationship with the guys in corporate office, in Brisbane. And so the fact that we had kicked the can off of it, kicked the can down the road, essentially, I just approached them and I fully didn't expect too much. But then they said, yeah, we're still keen to do it. And, I think I sent them an email and literally got overnight. We were on a Skype call. And we proceeded. That was late 2015. And then by 2016 or Christmas, we'd put it together as far as what our direction was going to be. And then, then you want to start talking about kicking on in an industry, in a new location. Yeah, that's what I can start talking about. It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're running a building company or you're a franchise brand like Smith & Sons. What I didn't have what was a distinct disadvantage was that in Australia and New Zealand, the Smith & Sons brand, because of its affiliation with GJ Gardner Homes, it's more straightforward, I think. It's a little bit simpler. Whereas in Canada, it was like, Smith and what? Who? You manufacture guns? No, mate, wrong brand. And so, I think a lot of that was, I had to make it work, Bosco, because I could go and build houses. But I was sort of, I was old, I was 42, 43 years of age. And I'm like, okay, I was really excited about the opportunity. And then you fast forward and we've got a few guys in the Smithies group here and a lot around establishing building companies and launching a franchise brand there's a lot of, it's just because it scares the shit out of you. Like I think I mentioned to you offline there that we had one of our guys who was in the Okanagan Valley who relocated to Victoria, to the island. And when Russ hit me up, I mean, that guy's situation come to mind immediately because he didn't have a really significant network. So I think you've got to have a really deep down conviction that when you do make the move, I'm going to burn the boats. And essentially when I moved to Canada, and, you know, we may cover this off later, but once I made that decision after 3 years, there was no going back. I'm going to get to that beach and I'm going to torch the boats because I don't have a backup plan. There is no real estate left for me. There is no business, you know, there's nothing because I needed to literally have a single focus on developing my business. And so, you know, there's a lot, we get caught up in the Hollywood side of it or, you know, the way that we'd like it to be. And then all of a sudden we get kicked in the ass and all of a sudden it's not. Well, now that tests our personal resolve. So, you know, I think it's a combination of the human systems, of course, and we'll get talking about that maybe later. But yeah, you as a person you've got to have the resilience to be able to weather those storms.
It sounds like your survival instincts also came out. Now, okay, you're in Canada, you've taken this time, you know, you get your residency, you're ready to get cracking. What's that like now going, okay, I've got a clean slate. Here's my time. Here's my moment to shine. You're trying to build a reputation for yourself in a new country now. What are you going through at that point, and what was that like?
The level of disrespect for a professional journeyman carpenter, qualified builder absolutely infuriated me. Nobody took me serious. And so I walk, you know, today, can you see that chip on my shoulder there, Bosco?
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I had family that would tell me that franchising won't work in the construction industry in Canada. Bless those souls. But I tell you what, they're on the top of my hit list. So yeah, look, there was this mixed emotion and you're right. There is a survival instinct. I definitely run to a fight. It's part of my entrepreneurial DNA. My personality is very intense, is very aggressive. However, I would refer to myself as an introvert, which people will just go, you're full of bullshit, because ultimately I recharge very well by myself. Like I love sipping a whiskey and watching a documentary of World War II. That's what I find, you know, to recharge me. So it was intense. The disrespect was outstanding. Now they build houses differently in this country because it's like they dig big holes under their house, Bosco, and they call them basements that can fill full of water, which is bloody hilarious. But it's like we've got to create that area where we can bring services in. So I had no knowledge on how to build that. So I had to go and work for a guy to just kind of get an understanding from a structural position, from a carpenter's position. So I think, you know, when we talk about those emotions that run through, I think there's got to have ego and humility have got to be in equal measures, because if I let my ego get in the way, matter of fact, when I first started, I remember the realtor, because we had to rent a house, you know, when we got started, the realtor knew that I had some skills and I actually did some work on the rental property, you know, that we did, you know, I did some drywall repairs and paint and reflooring. And he's like, you're all right. I could probably keep you busy. And I remember installing a dishwasher for $20 an hour. As a 25-year construction veteran, I am eating dog food right now because I'm like, okay, I'm happy to live under the radar. Everyone thinks I'm just a crazy immigrant, but I will have my day in the sun. But I had that commitment to evolving and adapting and excelling, I had to be patient because there's only so much I can do, even as intense as what I was, to make it happen. And that's, to me, is the 6 inches between your ears. That's where the warfare happens a lot.
Did you have a lot of Tim Hortons coffee in the morning during those days?
Mate, to this day, I can literally count the amount of coffees I've had on my two hands. I just don't drink coffee, mate. I'm a Monster or Red Bull. That is my liquid happiness. Doesn't matter what time of the year. That's my go-to. So I like the donuts, mate.
I made a stop. I do miss the Timbits and the steep teas from Tim Hortons, but, all right.
So you're a veteran.
I am a veteran. Yes. Yeah, especially in the cold. So you get started, you're growing the business. How do you take Smiths and Sons in Canada to where it is today? You know, obviously you transformed it and you're at a really different place now. What was the key transformative point for you?
I will say this, that it's funny, you know, it's very polarizing, my story with Smith and Sons back in the day, back in Australia, because it was a great opportunity and I really enjoyed, you know, my time there. But what I did is, you know, there was a lot of things which, because of that experience and then because of the opportunity that I had or have with Smith and Sons, I was able to bring about a lot of change, I've got some great business partners, one of which is Greg Gardner himself, the CEO in position there with Smith & Sons Australia and New Zealand. They really they believed a lot in me. They gave me a lot of creative license, but it was interesting that, the things that had really upset me as a operator gave me empathy when I started to launch the business here. And it was just, you just couldn't predict that course of events or the level of understanding. And so to be able to develop the business, we took a lot of what happened in the business back in sort of, let's say around the 2010-12 mark. And when I launched the business here, there was some things that I did mention to the guys. I said, we ain't doing this and we ain't doing that and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And, I think that's the evolution part of business. And kudos to those guys for giving me a little bit of creative license and putting up with a bit of my, intense bullshit. But, it's definitely, I think what it is, a lot of it is empathy, Bosco. I got to empathize, with myself, but then I've got to think about how can I bring value? How can I demonstrate value and bring authentic value to general contractors in this neck of the woods, being Canada? And it's the fundamentals and the value system that I've got on my conference room wall is the same ones that I would use in retail. I just think for builders, we have to think outside the box. We've got to move from the attitude that says me to we. We've got to understand that one of us can't be as smart as all of us. And the collaborative nature of what I'm doing in Smith & Sons in Canada, in conjunction with head office in Australia, in conjunction with the 5 staff that I have in the office, in conjunction with new franchise general contractors or builders that come in, mate, it's such a big talent pool that I just think that that's really what builders need. And that's what APB offers as well. That's, the reason I sit here today has a lot to do with the mindset change that I probably did pick up from Russ Stevens at APB. There's no question. We've had conversation and email trails backwards and forwards back in the early days when I hit the ground here originally. And I just absolutely believe in raising the bar in the building industry across the board, re-engineering the experience for clients. Yes. Delivering construction services at the higher level. Yes. But also with not taking away from the builders. We need to increase the professionalism. We need to understand that communication at a highest level is important because it has a knock-on effect in the way we, and how we demonstrate value to our clients and how we deal with our clients. And so I think what it comes down to is it's a different way that we look at how do we develop a building company as such.
I really resonate with the creating value because you could go to any part of the world and create value. So I think for me that really hit home because I take a lot of my journey and go where I am today is about creating value for the people I work with.
Authentic value, Bosco.
Authentic value.
Authentic value.
Yes.
Not just superficial bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this so I get what I want. Not that.
Yeah.
Give.
So, what are your plans for the future, I guess, now? You look back now and go, wow, I've come quite a long way and you've had all this change. I'm assuming you're adjusting to the cold weather, but what's the plan for the future?
I'm not adjusting to the cold weather. I go from home to a warm truck, to a warm office, to a warm truck, to maybe the pub and then home. So I don't do snow. I don't do cold. I'm not adapting. That's one thing I'm not going to excel in. But I think the future is we're a fledgling company, even though, Smith & Sons has been around for 14 years this year. What we've got is a very different business model. And a lot of that's to do with our experience. A lot of that's to do with me as the pioneer in that regard. I absolutely believe in, re-engineering the client experience, but really to enable that to happen as a preface to that, we've actually got to reset the thought process of builders. We don't have that sense of entitlement where clients should just pay me because I'm a really good carpenter. We've got to change those little mindsets and just start to rethink, how it is that we go about improving ourselves. And so all of that education, we talk about mindset, marketing and management and mentoring. And then, of course, business mastery, as general contractors, I think we undercook the fact that I did a 4-year apprenticeship and then, straight away I was making a little bit of money because I was an apprentice. I just think the ongoing improvement it's not proclaimed in amongst the industry. And if it is, it's very, very minor. And yet, when I'm talking to, as we, I'll go into a TikTok live here and answer some questions, but I get a lot of young general contractors, or they're 25 going, I want to be a gangster general contractor. And this is what I say to them. I'll say, kiddo, you've got to dream big, start small, systemize the shit out of everything, research financial principles and management, and understand business development and how that works in conjunction with human resource. And so all of these things, though, most of that was never really said to me as an apprentice carpenter. And so I think the future of Smith & Sons in Canada and the US is going to be, it's a massive climb to the top. There's no question. Higher the levels, bigger the devils. And the challenge, the weight is on my shoulders, because we are dealing with a lot of general contractors, and we've joined forces with general contractors. And we've got to have a very clear vision, and we've got to maintain our course no matter what happens in the political landscape, in the financial landscape and everything around. But, I think we want to be, we want to be a strong brand that's recognized across Canada, maybe across North America, as a brand that does, when you think renovations, like hamburgers, you think of a brand, right? That's my little esoteric goal that I'll quietly share with you, Bosco.
So you alluded to the importance of systemization, and it sounds like you're the student of the game when it comes to using systems. How do builders benefit from really mastering systems, and why is it so important today?
We talk about that businesses are run, by really good systems. But then you've got to have the ability to recruit good talent. You've got to be a good talent scout. So you have to be able to systemize. And I think a lot of that starts, and, it starts in the early days by way of really developing technique first, and then speed over time. Once you've spent some time in the seat, that's where you can then start to develop some pretty serious momentum. And so rather than sort of get bogged down in the micro and, what we use for estimating and things like that, which I'm always happy to go to because we get asked all the time. But I think it's the mindset around the power of developing a system or tapping into a system. And that could be as much as a training system like APB. Getting into those systems, which it's really like you undo one box and you look inside that box, and then there's, it's Pandora's box. It's like, okay, what else is in here? And I think the more you learn, the more you earn. And, I think I've had to revisit that kind of mindset, because remember, I didn't graduate. I got out of school in grade 11. I don't have the credentials nor the experience to have CEO on my business card. It's quite remarkable. But what I've done is, I'm part of a international coaching system in the States, a guy by the name of John Maxwell. I've invested there because I am a coach. I am a mentor. So I've got to get coaching systems clear in my mind and understand what's important, to my operators. Then you've got to understand the system of recruiting good talent. There again, it's like I'm saying, right, you need good humans to run good systems. You need to be a good talent scout. Okay, so what's the system for recruitment? What is the system for managing human resources, in perpetuity? And so when you say to me, what systems are important? I'm like, all of them.
All of them.
You just I don't know. And so this is why it's just something, it's not something you can go to a weekend seminar and go, right, I'm a gangster builder. I'm a ninja general contractor. Dude, it's just technology changes so fast. Society changes, therefore mindsets change, and you need to be understanding of, how to handle things. Like the classic is the millennials, it's like, no, it's not the millennials. It's just a different place in time. And so we've got to adapt. We've got to make sure that we understand, and then we've got to systemize to be able to fulfill whatever it is that we're trying to sort out.
How's the market doing in Canada right now, Max, when it comes to the building side of things?
Yeah, it's pretty lit up. I think we're really fortunate. I mean, you're familiar with the lay of the land from the island, right? From Vancouver Island through Lower Mainland BC up into the Okanagan Valley. I mean, it's a very sought after place to live. So, having the majority of my operators in that stretch, in that location or in those locations, there's great opportunity there. There's a lot of wealth in amongst it. So, what we love about renovations and remodeling is that, and I would say this with cautious optimism, but it's probably an industry that is relatively recession proof, perhaps. I might be going out on a limb. I might get bashed on social for that. But nonetheless, it's an environment that if you do it right, I mean, there's a lot of guys doing renovations who are going to struggle because of their lack of systems in the business, right? Whereas we're at the other end of the scale and, it's been fairly, it's challenging to develop a franchise brand like Smithy's in Canada, but my background where I never did any cost plus, having fixed price contracts was immediately my point of separation. It was by far my measurable advantage. Now what I had to do was I had to just convince or show value to general contractors because they could not fathom the fact that, the markup percentage that we apply as a minimum was almost double. It was over double what they would conventionally do because they were brought up in an ecosystem that just did cost plus for 15 or 20% as a management fee. And I'm like, guys, you just got to demonstrate value, authentic value, and look at the right type of client, and you'll actually have a better business that makes more money. It's not rocket science, but so the building industry is good, but it's, not only is it good, and there's a lot of guys who are obviously making a few dollars doing cost plus, for me to push a franchise brand and introduce a different system of, a way of doing business. Yeah, I've had my hands full. Yeah, I've gone home at night going, I think I should just go and build houses myself because sometimes it's quite, what do they say? Heavy hangs the head of the one that wears the crown. Yeah, that's a favorite of mine. It's on my dashboard, actually. Yeah.
Are the challenges different in Canada in comparison to, Australia and Brisbane, I guess, for builders? Other than the weather, I guess, what do you think are the more common challenges?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge, I was only chatting to a guy out of Edmonton yesterday, about, a franchise. And he said to me, he'd been in it for 15 years and he's still trying to work out what an appropriate profit margin might be. And I'm like, oh my word, and you know what? I'm sure that is not just a Canadian thing. I'm pretty confident from my background and, my exposure to the building market in Brisbane. We don't know. And I speak from personal experience. You go into an apprenticeship, nobody shares with you the intricate nature and how to be successful more often than not because they actually don't know. And they're not very good teachers when it comes to biz dev or financial management systems. And so there's this constant, it's the same old. It's like Groundhog Day. The next generation of carpenters come out. They go and get a builder's license. So they go and do their course at Master Builders like I did. And now I've got a license to go from, doing small carpentry projects to $1 million projects. And yet we don't have any business dev experience. We don't have any financial management understanding. It's dangerous. It's brutal. So look, there is in that regard the challenge here and there is to understand that your knowledge and experience is worth something. So you should be getting paid to deliver a proposal to clients. You should not be getting dragged around by your nose and quoting for free. That's horseshit. That doesn't happen on our watch. And of course, you've got to understand that, your business needs a minimum amount just to keep the lights on. And then you've got to understand, how your fixed expenses really impact your amount of billables per month to ensure that you maintain profitability. So it's the same diseases here as what's there, Bosco. That's what I would say.
What do you miss about the roots of carpentry, building? Obviously, you're playing a bigger game now, but if you look back down memory lane, what's the one thing that you still miss?
Mate, I think it's wishful thinking. Obviously, I romanticize, but I am 49 and I'm not sure that I could spend week after week knocking frames up and pulling floor joists and laying floor and frames and trusses and stuff like that. So look, I think what I do miss and what is a distinct difference between what I do today and what I did back then and what I do miss about that is that at the end of the day, you can walk away and look over your shoulder. And to this day, I can drive around. When I drag my kids back to Brisbane, I'm like, yeah, I built that and I built that. And that's the one where you were standing on the roof trusses. And that is something, again, it's what I identify with. So yeah, I do miss the practical nature because it's where I started. And then when I go home from the office here of a night time, I ain't got shit to look at. It's other than the investment now that we're making in people. And so, yeah, I do have to transition from that romantic kind of, look that I take when I think about my construction background. And now I'm investing in legacy. over currency, although currency's right in there behind. But yeah, I definitely do miss the hands on, and occasionally I'll pull the tools out at home and, tell the kids how good I am.
So you chose True North, and obviously now you're expanding into the US. Do you ever see yourself ever coming back to Australia, or do you feel like
burn the boats? No, it's look. I tell you what's worked out, and the reason I think it made it a little bit easier to do that, Bosco, is because we do. I do have business partners that are located, in Brisbane in the southeast corner. And so prior to COVID, I was back there. I was probably on a plane 2 and 3 times a year. So, which is all it needed for me to catch up. And of course, my folks live about 15 minutes from Smith & Son's head office on the Sunshine Coast. So it was just ticking boxes. It was great. So, I initially made the decision that once I do this, and I mean, it cost me a small fortune to make the move. There's no way I'm doing this twice. They'll bury me in the Great White North. There's no question.
Well, listen, if you were to go back to running a building company again and look back at your days and everything else, and not just running, but just doing what you're doing and everything else, what would you do differently? Is there any path or choice that you'd make different looking back now?
At the same time, give or take, maybe a few years before I got in as an apprentice carpenter, I did pick the guitar up, and I often say, I play in a few blues jams, and I've meddled with a few cover bands and stuff like that, and I play lead guitar, and I often think back, I'm like, if I didn't get that apprenticeship, I could have been rocking it out with Cold Chisel or friggin' like something I think maybe I would have had enough talent to do it, but I was caught up in the emotion of making money. And, honestly, I didn't have the academic chops to do anything else, or I didn't have the belief in myself because the education system didn't really cater for guys that would prefer to look out the window or, go and do something more hands on. And so, yeah, there's, I think there was a lot I would do differently in my journey as a construction operative. I think if I was talking to myself around the time I got my builder's license, I would be saying, mate, you need to double down understanding biz dev fundamentals, and you've got to look into financial management at the highest level, because if you don't, you will die. Your business will, so no, I wouldn't change anything. I mean, you've heard a lot of people probably say that, but yeah, rock and roll. I really could have dug to sort of get into the music scene, but I do see a lot of people here in this town, and they're like, I want to be a full-time musician, and they're living in the back of their car and shit. So, there's a part of me that you wouldn't go back and have another crack at it.
No, but the way it is. But at least you're rocking the haircut for a rock star. So that works in your favor, my man. I'm sure it gives a little bit of Australia away when people see you.
Too right. Well, what do they say? Business at the front, party at the back. And that is absolutely why we do it. It's so when I get on your podcast and I can look down the camera, you can't really see the fluff. But then when I get on stage, yeah, man, we just sport the mullet for sure.
Well, listen, it's been great talking to you, my man. I'm going to wrap this up with one final question. You talked a lot about, yeah, one final question, and it's about purpose. You talked about finding your purpose. You talked about reinventing your purpose. You talked about having new purpose. My final question for you is, what do you think your purpose is today?
Helping general contractors succeed. Like,
as simple as that, eh?
Yeah, mate, it just doesn't, and don't get me wrong, it is not all blue skies and lollipops. Like I've alluded to already, there's some days, but I think because I have the luxury of, associating or have people that are in my sphere of influence or network or whatever that are very wealthy. And, some of the guys that I respect the most are the guys that are fairly down to earth. And so, like I said, it's legacy over currency. In this day and age, and I'm fortunate enough to live in this era, and I would love to be a fly on the wall when my great grandkids can go and check out old man Max flapping his gums on the podcast or on YouTube if it's still around, if the world's still there. I've got no idea. So there's that part of it, which is, is what I regard as a great blessing. So that legacy side of things, because I don't know my great grandfather. I wouldn't know if he walked in the door. He'd be looking a little wrinkly, but nonetheless, yeah, I don't know that. So the purpose is to help a human day. And that's why I'm going to jump on in 10 minutes on a live Q&A on Instagram and on TikTok, and basically wait for people to log in and start asking questions. Like, there is absolutely no monetary benefit to that. But I kid you not, Bosco, the fulfillment that I get out of that based on my experience, and we don't do a lot of technical. I don't think I'm as technical as Russ Stevens. He's a bit of a ninja. But I think there's a little bit of I can help somebody. I don't know if you've heard that analogy where the guy that was walking down the beach and there was all these starfish on the beach and he picked one up and he threw it back in and someone said, don't worry about it. You can't possibly save them all. And then he picks another one up and he throws that back in the ocean. He says, yeah, but I just made a difference in that one's life. And I think in essence, that's what I'm trying to do.
If there's two things Russ loves, it's his systems and his accountants.
Sure.
Yeah, well, listen, man, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. For our listeners out there, you're probably the first guest I've had that actually has a TikTok channel. So what's the TikTok handle? Is it Gangster Builder or?
Maybe it should be. Okay, so business _for FOR _builders. So business for builders.
Business for builders. Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
And we're just about giving value, man.
All right, my man. Well, thank you so much for your time, your energy, your story, and just being real with us. Our listeners are going to love this, and I'm sure we'll have you back again. And I'm wishing you really well from here. Have a Tim Hortons coffee for me when you're done this too.
Certainly will. Thanks for having me, Bosco. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers, my man.
Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe to Professional Builders Secrets on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. To learn more about how the systems at the Association of Professional Builders can help you grow your building company, visit associationofprofessionalbuilders.com. See you next time.